Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Everybody gets a long weekend. This is Phil Stevens. I am a coach, powerlifter, strongman athlete, Highland Games athlete, and maker of many fine wares.
This is Coach Terrell, owner of Strength Guild in KC, weightlifting coach. I don't even know what I'm doing nowadays. Weightlifting, some general strength and conditioning. I've just started taking on a lot more online clients. So,
yeah, you follow the opportunities, kind of, as a business owner. Yeah, that's what I do. I mean, that's why I say, food industry and academic consultant. It's like, well, who's paying the contract right now? I guess it sounds kind of mercenary, but yeah. And Lonnie Lowry, also former competitive bodybuilder of a long time. I have two bits of science here today, and then Phil's going to ask a hard question, which is why do people keep doing certain strength sports, when ultimately you lose to gravity, right? Or you lose to Mother Earth or Father Time or whatever you want to say. There's no huge crescendo, where you hold up the trophy. Anyway, as far as the science news, I got two of these things from Science Daily today.
Strength and muscle sport news.
One of them is really weird, and the other one I wish Mike was on because I could ask him, because I think Mike consults on this stuff. But let's start with this first one. It's about ketogenic diets. A long-term ketogenic diet accumulates aged cells in normal tissues, study finds. So researchers urge take a keto break for prevention. This is from University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. So spanking new, like late May of this year. It says a strict keto-friendly diet, popular for weight loss and diabetes, depending on both the diet and the individual, might not be all that friendly. A new study led by researchers at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio found that a continuous long-term ketogenic diet may induce senescence, or aged cells in normal tissues, with the effects on heart and kidney most predominant. However, an intermittent ketogenic diet with planned keto vacations or breaks did not exhibit any of these pro-inflammatory effects due to aged cells, according to their research. Now, this is rodent work, and we got to keep that in mind. And I think Mike consults for some keto companies, so but he's not the kind of person who wants to gloss over any negative findings. I mean, you got to know what's going on. Essentially, it says take planned breaks. It says, to put this in perspective, 13 million Americans use a ketogenic diet, and we are saying that you need to take breaks from this diet or there could be long-term consequences, according to David Gius, G-I-U-S. He's a Mudfud, MD, PhD, Assistant Dean of Research down there. Now, I was looking at some mechanisms, right, because you want to know why. And it has to do with P53. I don't know if people are familiar, but it's part of the process, the metabolic pathway that cells decide to, self-destruct or continue or linger on, if you will, into poor performance and aging, I guess. So, yeah, the new study is actually entitled Ketogenic Diet Induces P53-Dependent Cellular Senescence in Multiple Organs. So, again, we're talking about high-fat, low-carb diets. Just wraps up here. It says the new study shows that mice on two different ketogenic diets at different ages induce cellular senescence in multiple organs, including heart and kidney. However, this cellular senescence was eliminated by a senolytic, or a class of small molecules that can destroy senescent cells. And it was prevented by administration of intermittent ketogenic diets. So a potential downside, it looks like aging, especially heart and kidney, if you're, going hardcore keto all the time without a break. And, you guys, the first thing I thought about was this, wasn't the anabolic diet intermittent?
Yeah, that's
keto?
what I was going to say.
Oh, man.
The first thing I think about is Mauro Di Pasquale. And it's like, that's what he preached.
Exactly.
And he was right, apparently, as far as these long-term side effects.
Well,
I mean, that wasn't
even
why, but
even the Atkins diet, which became very popular. Like, everybody with that book read chapter 1. And they didn't go on to read, like, okay, now you slowly up the carb intake. And it's like it wasn't zero forever. It was then, and Morrow's was the same as well. You took personal responsibility in that method to, okay, once you reach this point, now we need to find where you as the individual system runs the best. You slowly add some back in until you find, your level of low carb. Where you're the healthiest with blood markers and things like that. But everybody skips that part. It's like they want to go, it's like with everything else. They want to go to the most extreme all the time. Like, I'm going to find the most extreme thing and then try and live there. And what happens is they fail because they always, like, it's just like the people that I'm going to start training, and they go from couch to 7 days a week, 2 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't last. So,
overdo it.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, we really just need to repurpose, repackage, and remarket this again, since this will be like the 16th iteration coming back. If it's in the news now, it's coming back because the anabolic diet.
Mm-hmm.
That was like one of the first where you had the like carb refeeds.
Yep.
Then you had, you remember carb backloading and carb night solution.
Mm-hmm.
It was like repackaged again. And I forget the guy's name. It was like Lyle McDonald repackaged it in a different way. If this is like the beginning of the curve, we just need a catchy name. We need a little wrinkle, and then we got to get it back out there so we can all retire.
Yeah.
Right.
We got doctors, got Dr.
Yep.
You got Lonnie, got Dr. Mike who can vouch. We have gym people. Let's just rebrand, put it back out. If they ever listen to this podcast, they'll be mad. But
we're letting our secret go.
Yeah.
No, I mean, even in my own life experiences, like, that's how I live now. And like, I've known for years, and that's what, like, even when I married my wife, like I was in the seafood diet, meaning I see it and I shove it in my mouth to try and stay heavy. But I knew that at some point I respond well to low carb diets, that for longevity purposes, I would head back that way. Mm-hmm. But even then, it's like like right now, my typical is Monday through Friday, I eat meat, vegetables. Weekends, I have whatever the hell I want.
Mm-hmm.
And it just works well for me. And it works well on multiple levels. Like, it's the ease of the low carb diet and a ketogenic diet is what works for me. Like, I'm in a busy work week. I just need food. And there's no emotion tied to it. Give me that hamburger patty. I slam it. I get back to work. Mm-hmm. On the weekends, I have time for let's sit down, have a glass of wine, and, some spaghetti. That's when I cut loose. And, it works well for me. I dropped 50 pounds. I feel great. My joints feel great and things like that. And like we were talking about, I was talking with my gym partner the other day. I was like, man, what if I do a meet again? That'll be a lot of fun because I could essentially eat 50 pounds back onto me.
And enjoy the ride.
And just enjoy that ride again and do it short term. The short term, it's like anything else. Like, if you stay 300 pounds all the time, you're going to have, like, that shit's going to catch up with you much quicker than short bursts of, okay, meat, 12 weeks, eat up, come back down.
Right.
Not saying there's no negatives to that. Of course, I'm not stupid. There's going to be some negatives, and I'm going to have to watch myself and get blood tests done. And the minute I'm done, get shit back right. But at least I don't have, like, my A1C levels aren't jacked up for 20 years, and my blood pressure's like old crude oil.
Yeah, but Phil, that's old school. I mean, the whole concept of weight cycling or drug cycling. Sure. People used to go on cycles, right? They didn't just stay in one gear forever.
Yeah.
So, and I agree with you about the carb thing. Like, I just went to the dermatologist yesterday. I got another year of, no melanoma yet, because, I spent my youth in tan beds and I got a family history. I'm a pink Irish guy, Yep. But yeah, I would go low carb with cancer. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of that stuff started, in my opinion, with Fred Hatfield. Hey, guys, researchers got to take this seriously. But I think I would do that. But this article does argue that cells do want carbs as a fuel, at least on occasion. And I know what you're saying. People buy in so hardcore into something, they ignore the balance. I'm much more Buddhist in my perspective, like a middle path. Like if you want to do that, cycle it. Yeah, then do the little glycogen refeed. You're going to feel better psychologically. Your muscles are going to be fuller. I mean, I think D. Pascal had it right, So I like that kind of approach. And you know what? To be fair to Mike, because he's not here to defend ketones. First of all, this is a ketotic diet. It's not ketone supplements. You're not swallowing pills of BHB. Also, that's Mike's whole thing about the flex diet is time for carbs, time for fat. You want to be able to burn both at the drop of a hat. And that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is the first time I've seen anything really negative about long term. And maybe the hardcore keto people be like, Lottie, you suck. It's like, just, you can't have a belief system. You have to take new information and, put it in your thinking.
Yeah, that's like anything else. I mean, it's just like the strength coach. I won't name one. There's a couple out there that like get tied to something so much they will never question it. And it's like, there's better methods, bud. That's neat, but it's good to question your own dogma.
Right.
But, one thing people forget is, like, in the history of the human organism, we are not that far removed from when we were opportunistic eaters. Like, you ate what was there. Like, spring rolls around, shit starts growing. You start eating more carbs. Fall hits, you really load up on fruits and like everything's in season. And then winter hits, and now like people were put on like a diet naturally just by the variance of the world that like their diet adjusted year long by what was available. You had intermittent periods of keto type diets, and then different stuff started growing. Now you're loading up on carbs, and like the diet itself was transient. Not that long ago in human history,
Yeah.
And, like if you buy into the evolution thing, like that's what we're used to. Like we're hundreds of years removed from like being forced to do that. So you got to expect the body hasn't changed that much. And now we're in the age of like abundance all the time. So, and let's look at the health markers of the world. It's not doing us that much good, And now I'm the first one to argue, and I've said it for a long time, the same thing that makes us the fattest population ever on this planet is the same thing that makes us have the most freaky athletes because of the abundance of calories. Like fucking, I can't even think of it. Ronnie Coleman couldn't have existed 400 years ago. Like the village would have got pissed that he's eating all their food. Like, no, you don't get any more.
Right. The families, the grandmas, they don't get any food because they need to feed their local champion.
Exactly. So, now we're at that age, and like there's a reason why we're seeing. Besides, food is a big part of why we're seeing like linemen at 340 pounds running sub 540s and things like that. They have to have that fuel for that machine, but
right. No, it's true.
There's negative benefits to it. So
I remember
the average population that doesn't train their ass off.
I did a review for an NSCA book chapter I was writing about fats, and you can't escape the fact that a lot of these people are like, no, you can train your body, fat adapted and this and that, and you'll love the fats and the ketone bodies just as much as the carbs. No, not. I mean, when you look at the biochemistry, even when people are fat adapted, and it's way harder to do this than a lot of people realize, weeks of super low carb, kind of thing to force your enzymes to start burning fat more and all that. But carbs are a faster fuel. Yeah. So, I just don't see why you would demonize them necessarily. I'm not saying you can't get away with it. People can force their body to do all kinds of stuff. But, yeah.
But is it optimal? And that's
right.
The keto people love talking about the Inuit Indians that live on like seals and blubber. But even them, I guarantee you, if a tribe of Inuit Indians found like a blueberry patch, they're not going to say, no, it doesn't fit my diet. They're going to fucking grab those blueberries down opportunistically. Mm-hmm. And, it's just the way they are. They weren't.
And they're not particularly jacked. So,
yeah.
like what you actually want out of like optimal versus like a forced survival.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a pretty healthy situation kind of thing. I mean, the keto thing, and I don't know if maybe I'm out of loop or I'm getting old, but I feel like the keto thing is almost, it's on the backswing. It's like by itself, like that carnivore energy. Cause I think is it the carnivore MD? It was like, he just came out with a video and was like, you know what? I was looking at some stuff and turns out carbs are all right. Like,
Yeah.
so this is kind of on the backswing anyway. So the upswing and like the next thing. But what's funny about the low carb thing is like it is like dominated the diet landscape. But if you look back, I mean, early-ish 1900s, it was almost like a pure carb diet, like the high priority in carbs, and I mean like downgrading everything else, protein and fats, and it was, we're getting crazy results. But it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you were controlling the overall calorie intake, and I say it's the same with people who do like I don't know, if like the quote unquote cleanses, and it's like, the logic behind it where you're like, all right, now I'm eating like pretty much pure carbs, like all fruit, like, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, I feel so great. And then they will switch back to a pop diet of like low carb, and like, gosh, it's hard to stick to. And it's like, yeah, you could find somewhere in the middle there that I think would probably like get you what you want. But I will say, and I do have this follow-up question for both of you, just because Phil mentioned that he feels better doing kind of a modified carb cycling, like kind of a naturalistic carb cycling. Do you guys have instances where you feel better manipulating or moving the majority of your carbs to a certain part of the day? Like, I will say, so I have one client right now, we were just talking about this, who was like, oh yeah, I ate, pancakes in the morning and I felt great, and then feels terrible if he eats, carbs at night, can't sleep, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm like the opposite. Like high protein, low carb throughout the day, like mostly throughout the day. And if I kind of push my carbs to the night, like I sleep better, train better, etc. You guys have any insight into that, or like have any experience where you felt like really almost like maneuvering your carbs that way has helped you out? Just lifestyle, your feeling, that kind of stuff.
Right. The science suggests that people are better carbohydrate metabolizers in the morning, but that depends on like glycogen economy and stuff. You know what I mean? Like if you go train your ass off, you just thrown a huge monkey wrench in a lot of this stuff, because then you're going to refill your depleted glycogen stores and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, when you just look at healthy people who aren't training their butts off, people secrete more insulin in the morning. They drive more carbs into their tissues because of that extra insulin. Now, that could be a problem with stuff like unwanted weight gain, I suppose. So it depends on goals, I think. There's a lot of data. That's why I never liked the carb backloading idea. I think we might have had that guy on the show. And he's like, well, I'm a physicist, and Lonnie, if you read the literature, I'm like, well, you stick to your literature, because you're suggesting people just power down enormous amounts of carbohydrates in the evening, where the science is pretty clear. You're just more carb resistant in the evenings. But again, it probably worked for some people because they depleted their carbs during the day. They were training, and you train enough. Yeah, I mean, you'll burn through a third of all your muscle carb stores, your glycogen, even with some light, 3-4 sets of major muscle groups on your lunch break. Yeah. So imagine hard training. You'd be very depleted, and then maybe something like that would be helpful. It would certainly be comforting in the evening because people have more appetite. They have less satiety in the evening. So
I always lean towards, for me, what I found works best is mornings. But I don't know at this point. It could be my own bias getting a hold of me, and I understand that, because I'm like Lonnie. It just makes sense to me. So is that making me feel better? Because it makes sense to me, like, oh, if I have these, I have all day to burn them off, and I'm going to use this shit, whereas if I cram it at night, I'm going to bed. And I toss and turn more if I load up on a big meal. And let's be honest. I mean, I've come to the realization that I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and I can't eat like I used to.
Yeah.
Like I used to power down a huge meal and crash right out. Now if I do that, it's like I don't sleep well. You know?
Yeah. Like aging makes it hard. Like you don't sleep. I've seen conference talks where they're like, yeah, you're never going to get that deep, satisfying sleep you had when you're in your 20s. I'm like, well, another thing that sucks about aging then.
Yeah, I watch my kids sleep, and it's like, God, to be 9 again. They can sleep through anything.
Bliss.
And it's just...
But carbs, like you said, carbs used to knock you out at night, and now you're just...
Well, yeah, and even just the amounts, that's where I was heading. Like, for the first time in my life, I used to look at, you'd go to a restaurant and you'd look, they'd have the senior menu, and those meals were like half the size. Like, I understand those now. I can't eat what I did. It's like, oh, I'm getting close to that side of the menu. You know? I don't need the 1 pound steak anymore. And, it's like, wow, okay. So,
well, I think there's obviously individual differences. Like, what's your chronotype? Are you a morning lark? Are you a night owl? Like everybody
that's
has
true.
Different metabolisms and all that kind of stuff too. So I would think that honestly, it kind of comes back to what we were saying before. Find what works for you as what is that middle path? Time for carbs, a time for fats. I mean, I think there's kind of always a time for protein.
Yeah.
But my approach was never keto cycling like some of the guys I would talk to backstage at bodybuilding shows. It was just I would get a baseline number of carbs, let's say like 400 or 500 grams of carbs a day, and then for 2 weeks I'd have 350, and then for a couple of weeks I'd have 300, and then I'd do 250. It was like a progression model, pulling the carbs out, and that always worked for me because I just couldn't do. My wife and I have tried like zero carb, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I always joke about this, right? But you're looking at saltine crackers like they're freaking Cinnabons, and it's not. I'm like, that's not for me. I don't know if I can do that. Well, but I was able to train myself down on the carbs.
Part of that is what type of person you are mentally, and that's like Dave talks about. Like Dave talks about the whole blaster dust. There are people that can exist in that world you're talking about, where it's like, okay, I'll just take a little bit away, and then there's people like I'm definitely not wired that way. It's like if I'm going to have a little, I'm just going free reign. Mm-hmm. It's easier for me to just no, yes, and like all 5 days a week, it's no. 2 days a week, it's yes. And I can live comfortably there. That's much easier for me than, okay, 250 grams. Then I got to track the shit. Like I don't have to track. Those aren't allowed. Those are easy, black and white. Let's go.
Right. The rules are just,
the rules are very plain and easy. So, and that's where I exist well. But I understand that others don't. And then like you talked about, I think as far as like when to take the carbs, I think maybe it's also what type of person you are. Like me, I've always been a morning person since my birth. I was always an early riser and, okay, let's go, right when I wake up. And then at night, I slow down. Like if I have a lot of things to do, I know I have a lot of things to do tomorrow. I will crash out. I will wake up and get on it right now because I know I'm best in the morning. And I will try and get that thing done. My wife, she's the opposite. She's a night owl. She'll wake up, spend 2 or 3 hours drinking coffee, relaxing, and then about noon she'll start hitting things and she'll work until the wee hours. She's best, has her most energy and motivation later in the day. So
right on.
She fuels herself later in the day.
Even when I pulled carbs out like I did, when I got down to almost none, like, in the last couple of weeks before a show, it's like 50 to 100 grams a day. It was really low, but I would still have my bowl of oatmeal in the morning, oats and berries, had to have it in the morning, and then I would have some carbs right after I trained, mid-afternoon, late afternoon. I did want to say one thing before we move on to this other one, is that I've also seen data that tons of carbs all the time, of course, that drives glycolysis, right? The carb breakdown pathway in your tissues, and that is linked to premature aging. So it sounds like if you go hardcore keto with no breaks, you premature age your cells. And if you go hardcore carb all the time, you're also premature aging your cells. In fact, they've talked about that whole calorie restriction and how that enhances lifespan. A lot of that has to do with the carb part of the calorie restriction. It's, again, we're back to the middle path. I think it's psychologically better. It's probably physiologically better. And Mike would be happy here. And like, this is kind of the flex diet. I don't know all the details of Mike's flex diet, but yeah, you have to be able to use these different fuel sources on demand. So this other one just looked like bodybuilding to me. And again, this is why when we scan through the news, we bring this kind of muscle head mentality to it, I guess. And this especially jumped out because I just went to dermatologist yesterday, like I said, and dermatologists find ultraviolet radiation increases appetite but prevents body weight gain. Now, this is late May of 24. This is spanking new stuff. Check this out. It says, in a novel study, and this is weird, a team of dermatologists evaluated the effect of UV exposure on appetite and weight regulation. They found that UV exposure raises norepinephrine levels, right, noradrenaline, decreases leptin, and that's why you get hungry, and induces the browning of subcutaneous fat, thereby increasing energy expenditure. So I think our listeners know, of course, white fat is typical fat. It's less metabolically active. It's not inert, but less metabolically active than brown fat, where you have like uncoupling proteins and heat, wasting energy is heat and all that kind of stuff. For years, there was a lot of debate. Does brown fat have a big impact on adults, like it might in infants and all that? But anyway, it says these results potentially pave the way for new approaches to prevent and treat obesity. This was in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology. Now, let me just offer this quick. Investigators discovered that when exposed to UV radiation consistently, mice fed a normal diet, again, rodent stuff, and those on a high-fat diet exhibited increased appetite due to the decrease in leptin, a key hormone in appetite regulation. However, there was no weight increase. They found that the UV radiation inhibits weight gain, even though, again, the hunger went up, by enhancing the secretion of the neurotransmitter norepi, right, which not only decreases leptin, but also increases energy expenditure through the browning of subcutaneous fat. Now, to go on and sort of point, in people with genetic background like I have, it says corresponding author Dong Hoon Lee, who's an MD PhD at Seoul National University, he noted that because UV exposure can accelerate skin aging and promote skin cancer, it's advisable to minimize exposure. So they're looking for other ways. Like, what's the root mechanism? Like, is it vitamin D, right? UV light on your skin. Maybe there's a vitamin D thing going on. But this reminds me, again, with the bodybuilding, remember like pumping iron, Arnold and, Ed Corney and all these guys, they're laying around in the California sun all the time. Like they're getting ready for a show, for some big event. And they're always tanning. Now, they're doing it partly because they're going to look good on stage. Yeah. And I always found that I had to do some natural tanning. It couldn't be all fake. Like I knew a couple of guys who just fake. And literally the last evening, it didn't look right. The color wasn't right. It had no depth. And at the same time, I still remember people, and this is ironic now because I'm sort of like, age spots and freckle blotchy and all this stuff. But at the time they're like, wow, your skin, you really got that down. Like that looks right. And I'm like, well, it's natural tanning and dark as you can possibly get with the cosmetic fake stuff. And Phil, I never used to that was a part about bodybuilding, the theatrical stuff. I'm like naked in the bathtub. My wife painting me with a foam brush. I'm like, this just feels so fake, But it is interesting, though, that maybe all that tanning that bodybuilders do, they stumbled into something that was right. Like it was actually helping while they were cutting. Tan beds, laying out, all that kind of stuff. So, I literally was just told by the dermatologist, 0 sun exposure for you, mister. 0. Like, you get another year with no melanoma, but, what do you say, the pigmentation. Because I heard, and I don't know if anybody else has heard this, but I had a different dermatologist say that about 10 years after massive UV exposure, and it's true, about 10 years after I last competed when I was 43, that's where I got all these little brown dots all over me, and I'm like, they're not just freckles. They look like freckles, but, not good. And so this is not going to work for me, but I do find that's interesting too, right? Because I know powerlifters don't think about tanning the way bodybuilders do necessarily, but just weird and fascinating stuff that maybe bodybuilders had it right, that part of that whole lifestyle, now they're coming out and finding mechanisms why it all just worked to get on stage lean and nice, bronzy color and all that kind of stuff. But I just thought I would share that. I don't know if you guys,
The first thing that comes to mind to me is, like, generally when somebody is subjected to UV light, especially in a natural way, like go outside, they're generally more active. Like I don't go outside and then just lay down. I'll come inside and lay down. So how much of it is the activity? Like you get in bright light and you're just in the daytime, people are generally more active. You know? So how much of it is that? But that's something that it would take forever to flesh out. Like, oh, they were 25% more active under light, and whatever. So,
sounds like a psych experiment. Like, like the UV light. You know how they say blue light wakes you up and red light kind of calms you down.
Even if you were indoors in some controlled room, like if the lights were dim, you're generally going to lounge more. If all of a sudden it's just 8 million lumens in there, you ain't fucking laying down.
That's
you're
true.
Like, shit, you're moving around getting things done. So, But,
so I don't know. Jarrell, have you ever like laid out or tanned or anything? Sometimes it's fun to talk to strength, like the pure power sport athletes are like, no, man, that's just bodybuilders, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, some just because I'm biracial, but I'm black, really. So
we're a lot more pigment challenged than Jarrell is.
That's okay. Good point. Good point.
So it's like I get pretty dark pretty quick. And the range, I should say, is I'll be pretty light, in like right now or kind of wintertime. But I mean, I go outside if I'm outside a lot, especially like when my daughter's around and we go to the pool a lot, I'm pretty much Mexican. So it's like I get like really dark and pretty quick. I've never had to like try that hard to like maintain something like that. And I've never done like a true physique thing where I actually do the spray tan on top of it or anything like that. I've never done that. I definitely look better with more tan. I like it better, but I also like summer better. Like I just feel better. I like going outside and doing stuff. You know what I mean?
It's a good point about skin pigmentation though, because like the vitamin D studies suggest that people with a darker complexion make less vitamin D. So is that the mechanism? Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. This is rodent stuff. So it makes you think about like, do individual humans respond differently with this whole raised norepinephrine and all that, Okay. Well, let's go to break, and then we come back. We'll talk about this losing proposition of strength sports.
Hey, everybody. Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
All right, everybody. We are back. And one thing, I just brought it up today before the show. Like one thing I've been thinking about lately and talking with people about is just strength and power sports in general. And how, like, basically no matter, I don't even remember what the subject was. A client brought it up to me. And, they were talking about, like, this is going on. Is it my form or is it that I'm just weak? And they were just weak. And he kind of upset him. He's like, wow. That sucks. I was hoping it was just a quick form issue and not that I just need to get stronger. I was like, well, and what I told him was like, no matter what, you're never going to be strong enough. No matter what, you just reach, like, even if you have a goal, like I want to deadlift 500 pounds, you're going to reach there. And guess what? You're going to make a new goal. Like no matter what, you'll never be strong enough. You'll always have a weakness. No matter how strong you get, there's going to be like, if Half Thor deadlifted 1,100 pounds. Like all we got to do is put a 2.5 pound plate on there, and he has a weakness. Something's going to show up. Like no matter what, gravity is a heartless bitch, and she will always beat you. You're never going to win. Like you'll always lose. And the different thing about strength sports than other sports is like there is no Super Bowl, there is no World Series, and there is no like like we talked about before the show, I can understand to a level why somebody would devote 16 years of their life at the professional level. That's not even counting the 15 years it took to get to the professional level board. Let's say 25 years into one of the major three sports. We'll say football in this case because the injury rates are so high. Like, I can understand why, Johnny trains for 15 years, makes it to the NFL, and now he lets other grown-ass men beat the shit out of him for 15 years, knowing he's going to have long-term damage to joints, his brain, and things like that. But it's worth it due to the monetary return. Like, he knows that all I got to do is put 3 more seasons in, and my family is set up. My grandkids and their grandkids are set up for life. Like, that shit ain't happening in powerlifting. Like, you're lucky to win $100. So you can understand to a point why somebody put themselves through all that and get $100 million. But in the strength sports, even the Olympic weightlifting, like, the monetary return is essentially nothing. And people still devote a life to it. And, it takes a special kind of person. Arguably, my guess is Ed Cohn has made essentially nothing directly off of powerlifting. But he just kept doing it for decades, and it's almost, part of me thinks it's a more noble pursuit because of the lack of that monetary gain and just this constant fight, this constant losing battle. Like, I will never be good enough. And for me, that's like kept me going. I kind of like that. It's this, like, no matter what, because perfection in my eyes is like a fallacy. There is no such thing as the perfect anything, because once you're done, you look at it, you tear it down, and you try to figure out how I can do better. And I enjoy that fact. Like, if I ever did a meet and I was like, that's perfect, I can't do better. Well, why keep going? And even a bodybuilder, let's say you went on stage and, like, you knew I can't put together a better package than that ever. What's the reason in trying more? Like, why even pursue that anymore if you literally know you can't do better? Whereas in, like, powerlifting and things, it's like I can always train and put another 2.5 pound plate on the bar. And I don't, knowing that once I do that, there's another 2.5 right behind it waiting to kick my ass. But I like that aspect of it. It's like,
yeah, it's, what I like about that is it's open-ended, it's unlimited. I think for bodybuilders, it's partly because, and like powerlifters too, I think, or any power athlete, like, there's so many variables you got to juggle. How many balls in the air? Yeah. Like, can I line up just right? But I know what you're saying. Like, there were definitely times in people's careers of the famous bodybuilders where they were the best they've ever been. And you're like, he's never going to look like that again.
Yeah. But you put together this package. Yeah.
Yeah. But in power sports, like, especially because you have so many different, like, leagues and organizations, and like, nobody can really raise up a trophy and be like, strongest man in the world, mic drop. Know, you're always going to have sort of, no, that's, only in this category, and your gear or no gear or your whatever it is. You know what I mean? There's so many different.
Even weight class. Like, Ed will be the first one to argue. Everybody calls him the GOAT, and he's like, nah, he won't say it himself. He's like, yeah, but there were people stronger than me. They were bigger than me, but they were stronger than me, And it's like, I mean, it's arguable.
So. I mean, this is probably a topic for another day, but, like, the mechanisms that obfuscate that actual aspect, right? Like, weightlifting has a pretty clear path, like, the best weightlifters in the world, win the Olympics, win worlds, etc. But there are so many, even still, opportunities to, like, muddy the path to, like, be like, well, yeah, there's one, but then there's many in, like, powerlifting. Yeah. I mean, I see it in jiu-jitsu too, where it's like, you know how many world champions you run into in jiu-jitsu? Like, everybody's a fucking world champion of this or that. And it's like, white belt, world champion. And then, like, they don't, whatever. I mean, the main thing about, like, even that aspect of it is just, It's kind of like, well, one of my clients here, he has a philosophy about zeros and ones, like ones being people who like do shit, like they step up to do stuff for, like true internal desire.
Mm-hmm.
There's no external thing. And I mean, he represents it for sure. He's like a bass player in a death metal band, and he's like, and he's talking about bands that he likes, and he's like, oh, you pretty much have to dig through the internet like Indiana Jones to find some of the bands that he likes, and they have like 600 listeners or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like super low, but he's like, yeah, but they're ones, right? Like it's like, oh, but in his philosophy, it's like, yeah, but Taylor Swift stuff is like generic garbage. So she has, a billion listeners, but a billion times zero is still zero. Like they just, you know what I mean? It's
Harsh. Well, I mean, the same thing could be said like in professional sports. I was listening to an interview with Christian Okoye the other day, who, for Lonnie, it's like knowing he doesn't know sports well much. He was a famous running back for the Chiefs from South Africa. And his original background, he was huge, like 6'3", 270, a running back. His background was soccer. And he loved soccer. But he went to NFL and excelled there, but hated it. He played for like 10 years and hated it all the time. But he did it for the monetary gain because he knew it would change his life. Mm-hmm. There ain't nobody in powerlifting. I don't know anybody that does powerlifting and competes at it that hates it. Like, they're not doing it for anything but the love of the sport. Like, there is no, I'm going to do this. I fucking hate it, but man, it's going to pay the bills. That ain't happening. You're literally doing it for the love of the game. Like, everybody. Like, and when they quit, like, there's plenty of people that do powerlifting and they love it, and then they quit when they don't like it. It's a special person that, like, hangs in there like Ed and does it for 20 years. Like, because he got nothing more out of it besides his own, like, just self-reflection. And,
the draw for people like Ed, I got to think, is it's both the reason they do it and the weirdness of it all. And, like, when you mention football, yeah, there's those big paychecks.
Yep.
But you overcome your opponents. They're other humans. You
Yes.
can literally defeat them,
Yes.
hold up the trophy, you win, the end, right?
Yeah.
And when your opponent isn't a person or a team, it's gravity.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. it's
No,
it's
and,
not
like,
possible.
yeah, and, like, in the big sports, like, there's no question who won. Like, okay, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. They win. Everybody recognizes that. You go to a powerlifting meet, and it's like comes down to some coefficient who's the best lifter, and there's arguments like, no, that's fucking formula's bullshit, and like you walk away from a meet not knowing who really won. It's subjective.
Yeah, weird.
So, yeah. There is no clear winner ever. There's never an unarguable winner. So,
I mean, I do suppose, like, I've heard you and Jarrell, both of you guys talk about, like, in Olympic lifting, because of the strategy, opening lift, how big you make your jumps, all that kind of stuff. Like, you do get to defeat your next closest rival. I mean,
Yes.
there is that,
Yeah.
But that's as close as it would get, I would think.
Yeah, but there's a still argument against across weight classes and everything else. Whereas in, like, the major sports, it doesn't matter if you're, like, there's guys that are 150 pounds on the team. There are guys that are 350 pounds on the team. And you still know who won. Whereas in lifting, you don't. Like, even in the Olympics, okay, which person's the best lifter? Is it the guy in the 123 weight class, or is it the guy in the super heavyweights? And it's arguable. So
Yeah, I was always light heavyweight. So that was 198. I'd come at the top of my class and see how much damage I could do. There's no way without serious drugs I was going to be in shape 30 pounds bigger than that, But you're right. Like, if you say, oh, the heavyweight, Lonnie, that's the person who won the show.
Yeah.
Like, even if the overall was a smaller guy, the overall, sometimes a light heavyweight would win the overall in a show. But try to pose that proposition to a woman. She'd be like, I don't care who won the overall. I was the best woman in the event, and to your point, right? There's so many weight classes, and it's just really hard. There's never a definitive, like, up on the gold pedestal, the number one pedestal, you win the end.
Yep.
And that's
that kind of goes into what I almost think, and this is like a personal thing, where what really it truly inspires, like, a greatness or like great aspect, even in the big sports, is like to me of like a fundamental curiosity. Because even being great, right? Like so being a world champion, like being a world champion once, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what, and you're better than everyone one time. Like what inspires that, the people who do it like back to back, like who just run a whole, like do this whole crazy run, right?
Mm-hmm.
What inspires them to do it again or like to maintain it, whatever. Because if you maintain, you're going to be behind,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you get there and you're like, oh, I'm good enough, because you have to like keep growing and getting better. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think of, the Jordan Bulls and the three-peat where it's like their teams had to keep getting better throughout those three-peats. It wasn't like they were just excellent. Everyone else was also also excellent and also trying to go to the thing. The Chiefs right now, right? Like their team is and this is because of the contracts in football, but their team is way different every year.
Mm-hmm.
And like one Super Bowl is generally enough for, like, if you win a Super Bowl in the NFL, I mean, that's almost like a crazy feat. Like, there's not something that's very common.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at even the last like 20 years or something, there's not a whole lot of different winners, right?
Yeah.
And so, and like, a team dominates, gets there, and then everyone's chasing you. So and every team is trying to do everything they can to just beat you because you're the champion, right?
Yeah.
But so what takes that champion to be like, I want to put something on film or on paper or on photo or whatever for like bodybuilding to like keep growing past I'm the best is like just like a fundamental curiosity and almost like a disregard for the accolades to some degree. Like, yeah, you're going for the Super Bowl, but it's like, no, we're trying to like put the best thing on film that we can every week.
Yeah.
And then the championships are a part of that, but it's like at the end of it, we don't remember that stuff. It's all about like process, etc. It's like that fundamental curiosity is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there's the interesting thing that, like, Lonnie, and definitely I'm facing now, like, age. Like, I'm still doing it. Even though I know I've reached that point in life where I'm not fighting to go forward, I'm fighting not to go backward. I know I'll never put together a competition like I did in the past. Like, I won't reach that level. I just can't. And that I did in my 30s, in my early 30s. It's just like I've reached a stage of my life where age, compounding wear and tear, but I still go out there and try and do my best. And that takes a different, like most people in the big three sports, they reach that point and they just know, okay, I'm done. They're not going to hire me anymore. Like,
right, you're done. They tell you you're done.
They tell you you're done. There is no telling somebody they're done in powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you quit when you don't have the passion anymore.
Well, it's weird, but I think the motivation as you age and fighting the long defeat and all that, to sound Tolkien-esque, but it's an inanimate object, right? Because. And that means I can keep fighting against it. In the NFL, forget it. Like after you're your best, let's say you're in your late 30s or something.
Yeah.
Forget it. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
They're going to hurt you. They're going to.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. Heavyweights can hurt, man.
Yeah.
We know this. But at the same time, nobody's saying you're done because you can't hang anymore.
Yes.
Just because I can't lift. I used to grab, I know this isn't a lot to you guys, but I would grab routinely the 120-pound dumbbells and I would do my sets of dumbbell bench press kind of thing. And I can't do that anymore. My shoulders would pop. They would just, mushroom cloud explode. It would not be good. Mm-hmm. So I have to use less weight. But you know what? So what, in a way, especially because bodybuilding is not about how much weight you move. But I'm allowed to keep doing that. And I think in what they call, what Marty Gallagher called big man sports, including the NFL, you reach a certain age, to your point, and you are done. You're
just
done.
Yeah.
There's no question. You can't keep fighting. You can't believe. You're just done.
Yep, you're done. And, that doesn't exist in strength-based sports. I mean, you have the weight classes and things like that. Any weight class sport is, across the board, it's questionable. Like the closest thing we've had in a weight class sport that's now a weight class sport that was like you could find the champion was like the original MMA stuff. when there was no weight classes.
Yeah, like you pretty much
You
like
know?
last man standing tournaments.
Yeah, and it, like when the Gracies were like fighting people that were twice their size and shit like that and winning. And like then there was no argument. Like who's better, the light guy or we have the light champion and the heavyweight champion. Who's better? And you have the group. Same thing in powerlifting. It's like you always have the arguments. Well, my Wilks is, and then you have the other side. It's always the big guys. Like nobody cares about fucking Wilks. How much did you lift up? You know?
Right.
No girls wondering what your Wilks is. They want to know how much you can squat.
That's funny.
So, and that's the argument for the big guys. Is like so there's always an argument. But
I always take the approach of have always taken the approach where it's like I never really aspired to be like the best in the world or even like the best in the country. Like even with weightlifting, it's I almost basically just wanted to get into that like 80%, right? Like that's how you can get there. It takes dedication and stuff, and then let your curiosity drive you into something else. Like, and then you climb back up the mountain again and learn some new stuff that you can apply to the previous thing. Maybe helps people out or whatever. Like going from 80% to 90% even is like that's a different mode, so to speak. But that being said, Phil, I think it's time for you to start your weightlifting career.
Oh God. I can't even put literally if I tried to I can't put both my hands over my head and
with no weight in them.
Oh Jesus. I remember it was like 5-6 years ago I sent you a video of me doing snatches and you're like, fuck, that's a lot better than I thought it'd be. It's still horrible. But like there is no way I could put a bar over my head and sit down on my ankles. Shit would explode.
I know we're getting close on time here, but Gerald, you just said something that really struck me too. Yeah, this is what you mean, but like that 80%, 90%, like you're talking about disproportionate self-commitment, involvement to get each percent. Like my goal when I was competing was always be in the top 5, be competitive, be a threat for first place at a fairly high level. Like I couldn't do national level, right? Those guys were on crazy drugs. I couldn't do it. But at the regional level, I could do that. And it felt good to be second place when there's 22 guys in the lineup, half of them or most of them are half your age, kind of thing. I always looked at myself like in that like 80th percentile, like Lonnie's competitive and I'm just going to have to your point, like curiosity, who's going to show up, who am I going to meet? Can I put together a package better than last time? It was always in that sort of between 80 and 90 range. I never had any delusions of grandeur. Phil, you talk about all the time. These young guys come to you and gals. Mm-hmm. I want to be Mr. Olympia. And I disabused myself of that notion. It sounds it's not defeatist. I'm a physiologist. I know what's possible.
Yes.
And being in shape at around 200 pounds at 5'9", that's pushing the envelope, man. I couldn't, I'm not stupid. Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know if that's what you mean, but yeah, that's that kind of thing. Like the higher up you go in percentile, that has a big influence on, are you the best? Do you keep doing this? Are you neck and neck with another best in the world? And I don't know, Phil, if you were like that, you were flirting. You're probably 95%, weren't you? Like on certain things.
Oh, there was a point there on deadlift where, like, if I'd have made that 800-pound deadlift, the one I missed, I would have been the strongest person at that time in the world. Like, the only person ahead of me was Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I was there, and that's the weird thing is I look back now, and that's only been like 15 years. Like, those numbers are shit now. Like, and that was weight class wise, of course. Now I'm making the argument for, there were heavyweights, super heavyweights, and 308ers that were beating me. But in my world of the 275 class, like I was up there. And it's easy. It's easy to pursue something when you're there. Like it's hard to pursue something when like I'm fighting to be like 47th,
overall, right.
or like now I'm fighting for none of that. I'm just fighting, like, I'm going to go in and squat heavy today. I'm going to do a bunch of sets of 10 just because, because I like it. You know,
Yeah.
like I puked last weekend after squatting for the first time in a decade.
Oh, wow.
And like we did so many sets of 10 and I'm not used to it. And that lactic acid I was like, guys, I got to go outside. And my son was all worried. Pop, are you okay? I was like, dude, I did this to myself. I'm good.
Right.
No, I just got to get this out of me.
It happens.
Yep. And it's like the shit we put ourselves through just for fun. You know?
Yeah. And it's a good point. Like, I'm going to take some ibuprofen and caffeinate, and I'm going to go to the gym after this, and I'm not using weights that I used to use.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really honestly willing to diet that hard. I don't want to be 4% fat again. I really don't. You know, in some ways it's kind of been there, done that. And maybe that's the closure that we get. Like, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with this point and this point in my career.
And that's a weird thing to get used to.
It is weird to get used to, because I remember Rob used to say, I had a disagreement with Rob. Rob's like, I don't know what the motivation, I guess I'm just done at that point when I can't progress. Cause he always tells himself, I'm benching more than ever as far as total volume, or as far as, cause you can keep changing the variable.
Stick. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess, Rob, but at some point, man, you're going to have to come to grips with the fact that you are simply not as strong as you were at your peak when you're like 35 or whatever.
Yeah. That's like Wednesday. I went in the gym and we had some of my newer athlete girls that I trained, and I did 465, I think it was, for a set of 8 on deadlift. And they're like, oh my God, that's so awesome, this and that. And then I'm like, yeah, but there's a video of me not long ago. I did 500 for 17.
Right.
But I'm still happy about it. Like, I'm totally stoked about what I did. But I mean, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what I could do. But I'm still happy, and I still keep going. But at the same time, I recognize it could be easy to just, man, I fucking suck. I quit, because I can't do that. But I've tried. I went through that stage after my hip replacement where I was like, I'm going to retire, and there was just something missing in my life. I enjoy that fight against gravity. It's an honest fight, and I won that day. Like I said, gravity's a heartless bitch, but every once in a while I beat her, and I'll take that win. And it feels good, and it keeps me going. And like right now, may sound weird, but like literally what keeps me going is like, I'm not as good as I was, and I'll never be as good as I was, but I'm fucking better than you. Like the other people my age, it's like, I may hurt and I may feel bad, but me at my worst, I'm still a lot better than you at your best. Right. So,
well, like you said, like you look around the airport, you're like, I can still take all these guys' lunches.
Yep. That's like,
that's terrible thinking.
That's literally what keeps me going. Is like, I may be beat up. I've had surgeries on every limb, but everybody else my age, man,
is worse.
Good luck. So,
yeah. What about you, Jarrell? I mean, as we wrap up, where are you looking forward? Like, do you want a big win? Is it just that curiosity you're talking about? Like, what's the motivator in the strength sports? Because you're never going to get the, beat the other team kind of thing. So, like, what's the drive?
I mean, for me, my involvement in strength sports is like, really, honestly, right now, it's like kind of rebuilding the team back to that, like but it's all experience based. And there's something I took to heart from Louis Simmons a long time ago, actually. So he mentioned, and I don't know if there's a video of him talking about it again too, but I heard it from some of his athletes that came and did a seminar too, which was like, it's still all like you want to always focus on the best you can do at a thing or whatever it is, because if your goal is like to be a world champion, it's like that's still the path. And then let's say you actually get there and you're the best in the world, what drives you to do the next thing? Like to do, let's say 650 is, whatever the lift is, say 650 will get you a world championship or be a world record. What drives you to come back and do 672 or whatever?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like the pure curiosity of it, really like that pure like self-improvement aspect. I personally like learning new stuff. I treat everything like almost like an academic pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
And so the deeper you dive on strength stuff is like the more you learn about a lot of different stuff. And like you have different things you can apply. So the practice of it, the process of it, and I just kind of enjoy the suffering of all of it. But competition wise, it depends. When I went into coaching, that's almost when I sacrificed like go get it, aspect of it. Because
For yourself.
I spend so much time
on others.
Like even when I was at my strongest, I was never able to put a strong performance on the platform because I was coaching people. Like, and it's not saying it was like their fault, but it's like you start the day early and I'm coaching and you're mentally invested by the time you get to your lifts. And when I was strong, my lifts were last. So it was like the fucking worst, like the worst time to like lift. I think there was one meet where I was, in the neighborhood of, so I was aiming to put up a 140 snatch at that meet. So that would have been like a 3-0 something snatch. And because I knew I could always lift more on the platform than I could in training. And so I was training hard and everything was going fine in training. But I got to the meet and I did like this whole day of, coaching, had like terrible migraine, was like throwing up before my lifts by the time we got to the end of the meet. And I think I maybe did like 120, 150, and I was planning my goal was like 140, 170 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it just had always been like that, like after I started coaching. But I just love the aspect of like seeing what I can do. Like that's the same with jiu-jitsu too. I don't really have a drive to like do a competition necessarily. Part of it's how much energy I can put into it. Like I know what I would want to put into it if I was competing, like how much I would train and how intense I would be towards it. But it's like, I don't want to do that. I kind of want to train, learn, have a good time, and like keep growing. So that's kind of more my interest. That curiosity, that learning aspect is more kind of how I approach everything.
For you guys, it's your job too. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I was a teacher. Yeah, I was a nutrition teacher. It was related. But the bodybuilding was a very different thing. So, I mean, you guys are making a living at this.
Yeah.
And that's got to that's got to factor into it, though.
Well, and there's also that case, and Jarrell kind of touched on it. Like, it's real easy. Like, generally, it's a realization that what I do on the platform, let's say I went out and broke a world record. It's much harder for me to get motivated by that to then break my own record again than it is like me breaking that record is less motivation for me to keep going than it is for somebody else. Like me breaking the record gives Johnny over there huge motivation to beat me. Like, okay, there's a new best, and that's why it happens. Like we talked about, it's the first 1,000-pound deadlift. For a long time, people thought it was impossible. And then once it happened again and again. But it wasn't the same people. Like your motivation, like the motivation it gives others is much greater than you. It's harder for me to say, okay, I'm going to do it again. I just did it. And I'm happy and I'm going to relish in that. Mm-hmm. Whereas the guy who didn't do it, his motivation is much higher to beat you. So it's that internal motivation is much harder to get than it is the external. So
I will leave, like, I know we're running out of time here, but I'll leave with this. Like, I think you kind of can realize when you're in what I would say is like a kind of a toxic place with a competitive aspect is when you train hard and you get to the end goal or whatever, and you don't experience any joy out of it. Yeah. It's just it's pure relief.
Yep.
Like, like you have just like, oh, it's just relief.
Yeah.
I actually noticed that with just kind of the way the Chiefs, I mean, they had elation, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But there is kind of this back end with like Chiefs, Patriots and stuff, and you listen to their interviews, it's like they are bored with the regular season. They're like almost can't wait to get to the playoffs. And then by the time they get to the end of the season, it's not necessarily like there is an elation, but then it's just like relief. Yeah. And that is kind of when you're getting into the neighborhood of like a toxic pursuit.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's a lot easier to be motivated when you didn't do it. Like the other teams are much more highly motivated to beat them. Because they're like, guys, we could quit and we're still Super Bowl champions 2 times in a row. is it worth it going for 3? Like the ability to push, like if they do it again, they are highly motivated individuals, like much more than if somebody else wins it again. Like it's hard to be a multi-time champion at something. Because
when you're king of the hill.
Because you just did, like, I'm already the king.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's easy to just lay off a little bit. You know? So, but, all right.
Yeah.
Good times. Everybody have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.
Right on. Long weekend.
Yep. So, all right, guys. I'm going to go squat. I'm going to go lose.
Don't puke. I'm going to go lose.
Until next week.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.